Just do it.
Yes, that should be us. We are live. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. It's been a very interesting past week. We're going to try and mix things up. You'll notice one person is missing. They are literally tied up. They are fine. They'll be back next week. So don't worry. You know the way the internet can spread rumors around. Anyway, we are here with Marty Party and Rectamando. Gents.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you guys doing? Hope you had a good weekend. The most bullish weekend in crypto history.
It was excellent. And in full disclosure, I'd expected a Bitcoin sell-off to happen post-conference, as is normal. We saw a little bit of volatility during the Trump speech, and we can't not talk about that. But the penny that dropped afterwards for different places around the world is kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about today, is nation states and the impact of that. So, Mando, I'm going to go to you first. What did you think of the Bitcoin conference? I watched every single session over the 2 days, and there was some really good stuff in there.
So I didn't get to watch every single session, but I did see some of the key speeches. It's tough to imagine a more bullish crypto conference than what you saw there. I guess my takeaways there was it was very interesting to see like the juxtaposition of mainstream adoption of crypto, particularly from politics, and also this anti-establishment movement. To see Trump go on after Edward Snowden is just kind of funny at a conference. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I really did find that kind of strange, and that's going to be really interesting to see over the coming years to see how they kind of meld together. Because obviously, Snowden was on there talking about, be careful here of adoption from governments. Don't trust everyone. They can track everything. Be very careful. And then you have really the headlines were really coming out of what Trump said, which was the most bullish things he could possibly say. As we went into this, it was a 20% probability on Polymarket that he would announce a Bitcoin strategic reserve. He went out there and did it. You had actually a bill announced by Loomis to bring up the crypto holdings to similar to that of gold. And then you had other bullish sentiment, like we're going to get rid of Gary Gensler, we're going to commute the service of Ross Ulbricht, like very, very bullish sentiment throughout. And then obviously you had super bullish price predictions pretty much from everyone. But I think the ones that stood out were mainly from Saylor, which were pointing to, millions of dollar Bitcoin price targets by 2045. So very, very bullish. It was interesting to see a very huge spectrum of people there who are going to be bullish for crypto. And in particular, just this time 12 months ago, I remember being on spaces where someone got laughed out of town to say that crypto was going to be an agenda for the election this year. And now it's kind of front and center. That's just a wildly, populist view, I think, which has been taken by pretty much all candidates now. We even saw headlines over the weekend that Kamala is starting to move towards softening her approach to crypto leaders, but very, very bullish.
Yeah. And I think, Marty, you were out and about at the weekend. You were sitting in a bar, and what popped on the TV?
Yeah, I was out, took the weekend to go touch grass out in nature, and I was at some random bar at some hotel, with a bunch of people having brunch, and they're on TV where they normally would be watching sports or baseball. Was Trump talking at the conference with Bitcoin, and everyone talking about Bitcoin, literally watching it going, I don't think people even knew that was going to happen. So I think as from a PR perspective, that was about the most bullish Bitcoin PR I've ever seen in the US, for sure. That's like mainstream Bitcoin, positive messages, one after the other. I thought the whole conference was fantastic. I mean, I listened to everyone. We all know Cantor Fitzgerald just before, on the 27th, I reported, right? Got in. I think that was also a catalyst. That's a massive institutional adoption. Institutional adoption, sovereign adoption, the Bitcoin conference, all the messaging, Bitcoin as a reserve, and all leading up to what you said, James. I think we're going to see sovereign FOMO. And we've all known sovereign FOMO is the catalyst. And Michael Saylor's been saying it for years. That's the final tipping point.
Exactly. Just headlines this morning. Nation states are going to start thinking about Bitcoin reserve. Analyst, that's from Richard Byworth. Wall Street Journal, Trump adds crypto to his America First agenda. Forbes, Bitcoin as a reserve currency, geopolitical force, CNBC. We're about 6 months into an institutional kind of boom, says analysts. I mean, nothing but goodness. The thing that really took me aback was this. This is a lawmaker from Hong Kong, Johnny Ng, and he watched the speech. And he said, regarding Bitcoin becoming an official financial reserve for a country or region, I think this is worth considering. Like, I don't know. For me, that was very profound. Am I just getting overly excited? Or like, how many nation states around the world are sitting, looking at this and saying, okay, listen, the probability of a game theory happening is high now at this stage. Whether it happens in the next 6 months or the next 5 years, it's going to happen. So we should probably think about getting a little bit, printing off a little bit of money, stacking a little bit of Bitcoin, just for the hell of it. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's it. That was one of the most bullish things. It was so surprising to me that we were speaking about this months ago. You know, the idea that more fringe style economies were starting to potentially talk about having Bitcoin reserves. For the US to say it, that FOMO is in pretty much all of the G20 potentially. And not just them, it FOMO's in pension funds, it FOMO's in corporates. You know, if it's good enough for the Fed and for the US government, it's probably going to be good enough for any institution around the world to consider buying it. So you're not going to have that same level of, oh, no, we don't want to touch this because we're not sure about the policy around it. It really does bring it into the center of treasuries, I guess, for many different institutions. I do think we're going to see this FOMO. I did think it was interesting to think of Germany in that period. You know, like Germany has just gone and sold 50,000 Bitcoin or whatever it was, and then Trump announced it's going to be part of the strategic reserve. Like, that's a prime example of economy that it could turn around and end up buying Bitcoin. So I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, it was stunning. Any quick thoughts from you, Marty, on this one?
I mean, I thought when Trump started his speech, one of the most interesting things he said is one of the first sentences was that America should be the capital of crypto in the world.
Yep.
I think that's also going to raise a lot of eyebrows. I mean, these are incredible statements. So I think in any other sovereign country, you know, on the fence about crypto, when you know what they always say? They always say the US will test things on their colonies, right? So they'll let the rest of the world test it out, Bitcoin as a reserve, crypto regulation, just to make sure it works out before they commit. It just feels like this conference was the point where the US has now said, okay, guys, it's our turn. We're stepping in. And he laid it out. I mean, he said he'd fire Gary Gensler on first day. He said Kamala wants to make Gary the Treasury Secretary. On and on. He said everything we've always wanted somebody to say. He said Bitcoin is not threatening the dollar. Washington is. That's an incredible statement. I don't think a lot of people knew. You know, I just think he laid it out. He's laid out a game plan. Now, whether or not that gets followed through, I don't think is as important as him saying it. I just think him saying it was a critical step. And it has been said, and we'll watch the market reaction over the course of the week leading into the FOMC, obviously this week, with rate cuts and the tone of the Federal Reserve.
Okay, so let's, unless you guys have anything else to add on that, Jen, I thought it was really positive. We have liquidation levels. It looks like the shorts could be in jeopardy here if we breach that 71K level, 72K level. There's a lot of shopping up there. But we are still facing that resistance at 70K out there in the marketplace. There was an interesting question you posed, Mando, at the beginning was, how far do you see Bitcoin going this cycle? And is it going to be the top dog, the fastest horse, or are there alternatives? Maybe let's tackle that right now.
Yeah, I just think that was my main takeaway here, really, is Bitcoin the best long? I thought it was interesting when I went on to CT, crypto Twitter, the day after the Bitcoin speech. CT was arguing about a meme coin and like dismissing the wood from the trees that, you know, there was this unbelievably bullish Bitcoin conference where you had, you know, potentially a Bitcoin strategic reserve, which could rival the US gold reserve. And that would FOMO in tons of different institutions. And part of me thinks that, you know, you look at Bitcoin dominance has been up only for the last 2 years. And then you go into this and you just think, you know, it is it is tough to bet against that Bitcoin has a unique selling point this cycle, which is institutional adoption, far higher than a lot of other things. So I guess I don't know if Bitcoin is the best horse, but I do think it's going to be up there. I think you have to really question whether you're really in it for Bitcoin beta, because I think some of those trades are a little bit more dangerous. As I like to think about this with all the bags I buy in crypto, it's like, who is the person that comes in and wants to buy your coin? And I feel like there's always an answer for that now for Bitcoin. Like, that passes the test at all times. I feel like Solana passes that test at several points of this cycle, and there's a few other coins that pass that test, but there's a lot of coins which a lot of people own where they're basically hoping that Bitcoin beta brings some buyer that's going to buy it, but it's kind of undefined, and it's not really clear like why somebody comes in and feels like they need to FOMO buy your bag. I feel like Bitcoin has a very obvious answer for that right now, and there's a few other things in the market that have it, but it's a small list in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
that's so well put. It brings up this came out a few days ago from Alex Kruger. It's exactly what you're talking about. Who is going to buy the bags? And there are these different types of archetypes out there. So when you consider Bitcoin, a nation state isn't going to FOMO into Ethereum or Solana. They're going to go after the store of value. It was a very interesting slide from Saylor's presentation, which I thought was the best presentation by far of the whole show. And he spoke about half of the 900 trillion of assets are store of value assets. Half. So that's, ballpark 500 trillion, let's call it. So it's a much bigger pool of money to go after. So when you talk about who's going to buy your bags or your token or whatever else, Bitcoin is the prime horse, but it's also the biggest horse. This is interesting. Bitcoin is for libertarians, Solana is for capitalists, and Ethereum is for socialists. Does that resonate with you, Mando, and to what you just said regarding who's going to buy?
I do think that Ethereum hasn't passed that test. I think the ETH ETF, we'll see how the flows go, but right now it's the jury's out, and I think it hasn't passed that test for a little bit of time. I think I'm not saying it can't in the future, but I do think that, and I kind of agree with some of this stuff. I do think that Ethereum, we've spoken about before, that the founders clearly came in here with more left-leaning socialist style policies, particularly around governance with things like DAOs, and the idea of solving, the tragedy of the commons in various different forms of society. I don't know if I strictly agree that Ethereum is for socialists, but I do think that I do think that the first two are pretty true.
So, Marty, I know you're probably not a socialist.
My take on this, I love Alex Kruger, by the way. I think Bitcoin for libertarians makes sense. I think what's interesting as well, as I keep expressing, the stablecoin revolution on the way. I think if you're any country that wants to participate in stablecoins, you're going to have to either run validators on the networks that run stablecoins, or buy a lot of inventory in order to participate. Remember, it's gas fees. In order to use these networks, you need it in gas, so you want to buy it early. So I think we're going to see a lot of Solana and Ethereum being bought and accumulated by institutions around the world that want to participate in these new banking rails. That's definitely going to come. Another thing that I think is interesting is Ethereum is positioned as the RWA chain. So I think any institution that's going to want to do large-scale fund real-world asset tokenization is probably going to buy a lot of Ethereum in order to accumulate gas at a cheap rate. So those two things I think will bolster Solana and Ethereum's accumulation. But I think Bitcoin at this point as a sovereign reserve, especially with the situation with the dollar and the geopolitical situation, I think the race is going to be at the Bitcoin level. I think we're going to finally see supply shock, which we've always thought would come. That's what I think is going to happen next. But yes, Solana for capitalists, I like that. And Ethereum for socialists, I agree. That's a little. I'm not 100% on the same page. I like Alex, and I think it's a cool post. But I'd say it's close. But
I think what Manda said was on the money, though. The original team are very much
so.
That way. Maybe
the team are.
Yeah. And this is from Jonah. I don't agree with him on all stuff, but some things, yes. This was, again, it goes back to legality and the SEC and regulation and how important that is in the crypto space.
That's
The
my
long-term
point.
value of ETH and SOL is heavily dependent on regulatory clarity. If the SEC allows tokenized equity, ETH and SOL become the infrastructure layer for the Internet of Value. If not, it's a longer slog. What do you think about that? And can two survive? Like if you're tokenizing a stock exchange, I keep going back to this. Ethereum is not going to cut it. It's too slow. It doesn't have the scale. You know, you see other faster chains choking out at 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 TPS, and the average run rate. So, Marty.
I think once again, James, there's the separation. I think institutions that are doing real world assets, you know, for funds or large net value assets, those are not a lot of transactions. Those are like people that want to, you know, maybe move around in funds once or twice a month. And specifically on private networks, you know, Ethereum is great for making private networks. We've got JP Morgan with Onyx, etc. They made their own private Ethereum networks. I think Ethereum has a place in that sort of institutional world, low transaction volume, but high transaction value. And that's going to be its bread and butter. I think Solana, on the other hand, is going to be the retail point of sale chain with tremendous volume. So I think they have their own place. And I think it's time for us to sort of start looking at them a little bit differently. Instead of the competition, I think they're each finding their own home. And then they'll generate stacks within those homes. So, but I really love this post. I think it's a really clever post. As I said, once again, the Chevron ruling changes the SEC's jurisdiction. So I don't think it's their job to decide whether Ethereum and Solana are securities anymore. I think it's now up to Congress. But and I think they have been chosen. I think probably Base, Arbitrum, and Solana will move the majority of stable coins. I think Tron has a chance. It's going to have to pass regulatory clarity because there's a lot of AML issues there. But those four might be the ones. And if so, just look for them to skyrocket, guys. We're talking way bigger market caps than Bitcoin. We're talking quadrillion dollars potentially. RWA, digitized treasuries, digitized debt, and stablecoin. These are just massive industries.
Yeah, and the other topic too, which kind of was expected. We all spoke about this for the last, you know, the upcoming ETH ETF launch. We knew Grayscale ETHE would dump hard, and boy, did it dump hard! Nearly $1.5 billion in the first 3 days. But what is interesting, the actual flow is about a quarter of what the Bitcoin ETF flows, and I think it was either Seyfert or Balchunas estimated about 20 to 25% of the original Bitcoin flows. Do you think this will continue? Obviously, the pace at which the Grayscale Ethereum Trust is dumping is startling. I mean, 15% in 3 days is pretty outrageous. And no money is going into their mini trust. It's all going into BlackRock, mostly. Mando?
Yeah, that was my main takeaway. If you're bullish on the ETH medium term, which I am, was that the Grayscale situation appears to be resolving itself much quicker than it did with Bitcoin. They've lost 20% of their AUM in the first few days of this ETF being live. So that's kind of wild. I think we could hopefully see that resolve itself relatively quickly in the move towards you know, these lower fee ETFs. And I think then, you know, if the second half of this week involves the bullish headlines that we've seen about Bitcoin, the bullish headlines we've seen about SOL adoption, then we start to see net inflows back into the ETF. Yeah, I mean we could be setting ourselves up for a very bullish week.
Awesome.
I mean, my take is that the ETF structure as it is with the in-cash redemption model doesn't really suit proof of stake networks. And so I'm not sure why I would buy the ETF if I can't stake and don't get staking yield. So I think that's going to always be the problem until they change that. And remember, they can very fast change that rule, especially with this institutional regulation change. They could flip it up and say, we've now decided to go in kind. If they go in kind and allow staking for the Ethereum ETF, I think you see a lot more inflows.
Yeah. And just as a little, see if I can share this chart. Speaking of, give me 1 second. First time trying this. We don't have let's go. See this chart here, if it's visible. We don't have CTO for the charts today, so you're going to have to rely on me. But we had a couple of new all-time highs. This is the Sol ETH chart. It just broke a new all-time high at 0.06. Also, we had Solana dominance hit a new all-time high as well, which is pretty staggering. That hit 3.66. Did that take anybody by surprise? The outperformance or the underperformance of Ethereum versus Solana, and Solana keeps on ripping away. Because my bull target for this run was a 3.6% dominance. My bear target was about 3% dominance. Now we're early and we're already at 3.66. And that basically means if the crypto market cap goes to 10 trillion, a lot of people expect that. Some people even say 10 to 20 trillion. I don't think we'll go to 10 trillion, but maybe we should talk about that. And the dominance stays the same. That means Solana goes to $816, which is crazy to think about. Marty, where do you see the crypto dominance going?
Yeah, I mean,
How
for
high?
me, first of all, the interim race has been, to me, Solana and BNB. I think fighting for that fourth spot, and we saw that finally come to conclusion. We've got the first flippening where BNB is now 3.59 dominance, so 3.59% of all crypto market cap is BNB, and Solana moved to 3.69, nearly 3.7. So that's the first flippening. The next will be Solana ETH, which is breaking out right now. But then I watch fees, guys. I watch fees and revenues on chain. And Ethereum fees have now dropped today to borderline $1 million. Solana is now at 2.5 million. And look at the difference in the market caps. And I think fundamentally people are looking at that. 400 billion versus 90 billion, whilst making nearly twice the fees and revenue. Something's got to give. So I think Ethereum is either going to have to come down in market cap, or Solana's going to have to catch up. But I think somewhere along the way, there'll be a new value for Solana's market cap. I would say it's between 150 and 200 billion. I think that's where we're going.
Okay, so that's like a 2x to 2.5x from here, ballpark.
I think so. Definitely in the short term, before we even hit any form of a major bull run. This is a correction, a fundamental correction. And we know why. It's because L2 came in, taking a lot of the volume, so the revenues and fees on Ethereum are going to drop. And I think people have been waiting for that, and we're seeing it happen in real time. You can watch this on Artemis. I use Artemis dashboard. Very great for seeing on-chain data. And also ETH TVL is coming down. There's a correction in Ethereum happening.
Yeah. There's another quick... sorry, Manda, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, because I think obviously on this show we've been bullish on Solana, but how bullish and where do we see it ending is probably a bit more refined. My guess is that we're heading more towards like 5 to 6% Sol dominance. I think we could head towards that sort of level. So I think that kind of is in line with what Marty's saying. I think we'd look for 150-ish on market cap before the end of the year, something like that.
And
we're at 17 and 4 right now. 17% dominance ETH4. I would say they're going to, meet in the middle somewhere maybe. So maybe 5 or 6, like you said. Maybe it drops down under 14, 13, 12 maybe. Something like that. What we're also seeing, guys, I've been monitoring it this morning, is a lot of the other chains that have just been dormant, the Cardanos, the Polkadots, the Avalanches. A lot of those flows are now moving into these winners, and I think we don't talk about that enough. There might be a large flood of capital moving out of those sort of dead chains and trying to jump into this action.
Yeah, this is an interesting chart here. I call it the Sol upside model, and it takes, just to show you the breakdown. Anybody can download this as well on TradingView. But what I did was, and it's a dynamic model, it calculates the actual price of Solana based on a percentage of ETH market cap. So right now, we are just about to eclipse 20% of ETH market cap. It's only been above that once briefly before. It's about to blast above it again. And it also takes into account the number of tokens that are in liquidation, etc. But how high do you think we could get? So there's the 33% ETH market cap, which would take the price to 280. Then 50% ETH market cap is 430, and 70% is my total bull target, which would be 603. Now that assumes Ethereum price market cap stays the same. Now, if imagine the ETH market cap doubles, we had to say $8,000 ETH. This thing is going to the moon. So any thoughts on this type of logic?
The one thing I would say here is this: I assume this is current market cap.
Yeah, it's dynamic. It changes every second. Yep.
Yeah. So I remember we did get a lot of FTX sold all of their bags to a bunch of hedge funds, which will be unlocking linearly over the next 4 years. That's the one thing around FUD I think we will see. There's some big unlocks, I think, in January, a couple other times. So I would be aware that we will periodically see FUD around unlocks on Solana. They're not crazy, but they are there. That's the one thing I would say is, at the end of the day, it's just demand and supply. And unlocks of supply will probably cause some level of underperformance of that period. So although I'm bullish on Solana, one of the reasons why I'm not like, oh my God, this could go up and be, 10% market dominance is because I think there's some supply still to get through there, which could cause some underperformance.
Yeah, and I did look at that. Many of them are locked in for out to 4 years. So
It's 4 years,
yeah. So it's not going to rain down tokens like it is with ENA and all the other names out there. So that's not too concerning. So
it's not horrific, but it's definitely something to notice for this. Like, I think on a fully diluted market cap, it's not 20%, right? I don't even know. So Solana on a fully diluted, it's closer to 20, must be 26, 27%, something like that. So there's definitely a difference there, and it's a difference which will become important because I don't think these guys are long-term holders. I think they'll probably sell.
Yeah, and the crazy thing as well, which I never understood, these accumulative flows in and out of the new ETH ETFs. It is tanking. The gray is grayscale. It's ripping down so fast. But the question is, going back to the original premise, Marty, maybe for you, like when you can get staking reward in Ethereum, but no staking reward in the ETF, how big of a headwind is that for the ETH ETF?
I think it's a massive one for proof of stake. I mean, the whole point of it is to stake, and I also think there's the gorilla in the room that with proof of stake, if Coinbase starts as the custodian starts holding massive amounts of the stake, at what point at 51% do they own the network? And people are starting to talk about that. With proof of work, it's a little bit different. With proof of stake, the stake is the most important thing. That's your super majority. So, we're right now at 25%. As it approaches 30, 40%, it starts to become a security risk. I worry about it. And together with Ethereum becoming inflationary. I mean, if you got ultrasound money, I've had Twitter wars with people about this, but look at the chart since the merge. Ethereum is pointing straight, becoming extremely inflationary again. It's not a deflationary asset. These two things are not good for me right now. The other thing I wanted to mention, Pantera and Galaxy were the two big buyers of the Solana, the FTX Solana. Galaxy is the number 2 Solana validator, so they're extremely in bed with Solana. But they also just filed with the SEC on Friday to move from the Caymans back to Delaware. So Galaxy Digital, that's Mark Novogratz, is moving back onshore with speculation of an IPO. So I think Galaxy is a very sound holder of Solana. They have a big game plan. Pantera obviously is a true crypto VC, and I agree with Mando. They probably have, they're probably going to be selling for profit at some point. But the Ethereum becoming inflationary is a bigger topic than I think people realize, because it relies on volume, and the push to layer 2 now takes the volume away from Ethereum, which makes
exactly. Can you double tap into that, Marty, for the audience to explain the less that Ethereum is used, the more inflationary it becomes, and how that ties into EIP 1559?
Yeah, I mean, the basic rule is that in proof of stake, every transaction, half of the gas is burned. And Solana is the same, half the gas. Ethereum and Solana have the same principle. So if you don't have a volume, you're not burning, but you're always issuing. So they rely on volume.
Yeah.
If you don't have the volume, they become inflationary. And if they become inflationary, there's sell pressure and the price will come down. So that's why I think you're seeing the bleeding out of Ethereum. And I don't know how they're going to address it. I think Vitalik is talking this week. If I'm not sure, it's tomorrow. at that big conference, ETHCon or whatever, I'm definitely believe he will address this.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's all happened pretty fast. And maybe Mando, you can think about this. Solana now dominates ETH and the layer 2s across MEV, across NFT volume, DEX volume, like all across the board. Yet Solana trades at less than a fifth of the market cap of Ethereum. So this goes back to your question. What gives? Now, when you look at the fees, the delta in fees between Ethereum and Solana, I mean, it is many step changes, and yet the economic value is higher in Solana now. How do you calculate?
Yeah, so I think the main retort here would be from people who are stronger in ETH would say it doesn't flip them in ETH plus all of it the L2 chains. That's like the main thing that comes back. The thing that's got me more bullish is it's starting to flip it. Exactly, yeah. That's what I mean. It is starting to flip that, like particularly in things like DEX volume. Not always on fees, but when it starts to flip it on the base layer 1 plus all the L2s, you've got to really question whether that is that's a steel man argument that you can rely upon, particularly because I think there's some flaws to those L2s which we've spoken about before. So that's what's gotten me even more bullish on Solana. For me, and I'm not maybe trying to diminish ETH in any way, but the real question for me on the back of that Bitcoin conference is it Solana or Bitcoin? That is actually my real question from here. Because I think that's a far more interesting question, because I actually think the flows to both of them are very different. You now have the idea of nation states coming in and buying potentially hundreds of billions worth of Bitcoin, and then you have crypto adoption. And I think it's going to be interesting to see, like, so far on this cycle, even though we have had ETFs come in and buy a ton of Bitcoin, we haven't seen that pick up in retail users. It's gone mainstream occasionally. Like my father-in-law asked me about Bitcoin this weekend. He was like, "Oh, Trump's gone bullish on Bitcoin." Not many people have been asking me about crypto. In fact, when I see people from my old TradFi world, they're like, "Oh, how's crypto done this year?" Because no one's paying attention. Like, it's still a bit fringe, I think. So I think we haven't seen that. And does higher Bitcoin or higher use of it as a gold substitute mean higher Solana volumes? I'm just not sure. I'm definitely, Solana's gone from 120 to 190. I'm definitely more cautious on it doing a parabolic move. It's already done like a pretty horrific, crazy move over the last, month since we were talking about this, a month and a half. Yeah. And part of me thinks that Bitcoin could see very unique flows from here, and that's what's going on in my head. Like, we can flog a dead horse and say, Solana's better than ETH. That's the real question. Does Solana outperform Bitcoin here?
It's so funny because I analyzed all of the chatter across all, Twitter, the YouTube comments on the Bitcoin Magazine streams. There was 3 things that came up the whole time. Only 3 topics. They were: number 1, when is Trump going live? Number 2, is ETH dead? And number 3, how high is Solana going? They were the 3 topics that were just resonating around the whole conference all the time. And even things like Mert had a Solana party, and the Hawk girl came there, not to the Bitcoin party. It was like very bizarre. And then you have the Franklin Templetons of the world talking about it and everything else. This is about bubbles in crypto. This is not about Solana, but this is from Mert. And he said something very interesting, I thought, and that was, we are in a new paradigm. And Marty, I'd like to know what you think about this. There is the old school who believes this is a bubble, simply have not understood the new mathematics of the blockchain, or you did not care enough to try. Bubbles are mathematically impossible in this new paradigm. So are corrections and all else. Now that's hyper bullish, at least from my perception. But what do you take from that, Marty?
I mean,
is it early adoption or?
I go back to Solana's role. I think, just to go to Mando's point, I think that Bitcoin and Solana are 2 totally different use cases of blockchain. I think Solana is an execution layer. It's not a store of value. Its entire purpose is to move value. And we just got this entire giant narrative globally about value going on chain, all different types of value: debt, treasuries, cash, assets. So I think there's not a lot of selling pressure for Solana right now. That together with market makers are now, there's no FTX Grey Cloud, there's no Sam Bankman-Fried, there's new buyers, there's new holders. I think Solana has passed the Lindy effect. That's what I think he's trying to say.
Well,
Solana
also,
has passed the Lindy effect, like Bitcoin passed the Lindy effect.
This is a troll post, though.
Yeah,
right?
Merck jokes around a lot. Yeah, he does.
He's probably had a couple of champagnes and wrote.
No, but this is a quote. This is a quote. I think it's maybe Suzu or
John McAfee.
John McAfee. Yeah. It was like this is an OG. This is an OG saying. I think when Bitcoin hit a new level, he put this out. Personally, I think Solana. Look at that chart. Right, like it is gone. It went from 125 to 192. This is what I love about not being a TA trader. Is that TA traders were probably bearish at 125. And they'll probably tell you that, it's going to the moon at 192. For me, I'm definitely more cautious here. Like we've just spoken about the fact that Bitcoin's sitting just below 71K. Solana's sitting just below basically all-time high style prices. If you're FOMOing in, just be a bit more cognizant at this stage that you are FOMOing after a huge, huge move. I'm super bullish on these things, but it definitely gets me, when you see quotes like this and people probably taking them more literally than they should, then it tells me that, maybe just understand that it's gone through a crazy move recently. And Solana just looks like it's outperforming everything. And the FOMO's super high out there in the market.
Yeah. I think
also, we have to understand that Mert is now the #1 validator on Solana, right? Helios.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Galaxy. So he's on all-time ego high. Just be wary.
$2.5 billion staked with him. And in full disclosure, I've got some stake with him too. This is probably an important chart. This is the Solana dominance chart. You can see, like, this tells you more about where things are going and where the money is going than anything else. And you can see it hit that 3.66, and everything else is kind of fading away, which is an important trend to follow. So that's enough of that. Let's talk. We have a little bit of Wall Street as well. I think the Franklin Templeton is talking about Solana ETF, which is big news too. We saw it with #4 market cap. Back to Bitcoin. We can't understate the power of this. And I should have brought this up earlier, but Wisconsin first, then Jersey, now Michigan. The United States pension funds, and some of these guys are huge. Like CalPERS is the second or largest pension fund on the planet. It's the California Public Employee State Pension or something like that. These things are massive, and the Japanese pension funds are massive. The Norwegian sovereign funds are massive. They're coming. And I think some people are overlooking how much these allocations are. If you took all of the pension funds of the United States and they had a 2% allocation to Bitcoin, Bitcoin goes straight to $200,000. And that's just US.
Yeah, I thought this was actually one of the most interesting things over the weekend. It was the talk with the BlackRock, the head of ETFs at BlackRock, I think it was, who said that 95% of all their buyers are buy and hold investors.
Yep.
The BlackRock ETF, the Bitcoin ETF, hasn't had a single day of outflows since it started.
Yep.
Single day of outflows. So these are buy and hold people. And if you see the Fed come in, or there's a shift towards US government policy that you should buy Bitcoin, you'll see pension funds, you'll see insurance funds, you'll see local levels of government all consider buying this, and they're buy and hold investors or very, very long-term liability holders. So I think this is super bullish.
Mando, can I double tap into that for a second? So again, you know how markets work. I want you to explain to the audience what the buy and hold means. It's not just buy and hold, it's perpetual bid, because if they are allocating 2% to Bitcoin, it's a segment of every paycheck, payroll tax, etc., that goes into these funds. Can you talk about that, the size of that perpetual bid coming in all the time?
Yeah, so obviously how insurance firms work or pension firms work is that they have a long-term liability, i.e., your pension in 40 or 50 years, and they'll have an average life of that. And for insurance policies, it's kind of similar, sometimes slightly shorter, sometimes slightly longer, depending on the insurance. But they'll own these assets, and they won't really sell. They often own fixed income securities, which they'll roll into new securities, so they'll just clip the coupon. I think with Bitcoin, they probably will have to sell some at some stage, just because they don't roll into the new, and there's no ongoing income from that security. At the same time, you're talking about them holding these for a long time. The average life of these is often in the decades, like 30, 40 years. So if they are buying this to satiate the average life of their liabilities, they could be holding this for an obscene amount of time.
Which is also radically going to change the on-chain metrics around Bitcoin. Marty, what happens when all of this Bitcoin goes into this big BlackRock black hole?
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem. These custodians is a problem, but it's also a good problem to have. Once again, I think people also don't understand these ETFs can change too. There can be other ETF models coming out very fast. I think we're seeing a paradigm shift right now. I think, like we always say, it starts slowly and then it accelerates. These pension funds adding Bitcoin, other pension funds will have to follow suit. You're going to see supply shock. The whole question is, does Binance control the price of Bitcoin still? I've always said for years now.
Yeah.
Until Binance doesn't control the price, it does. So you can see today we've got a flush of $3,000, right? From 70 down to 67,800 right now. That's Binance doing its thing. So, and then the carry trade on the ETF side will try and keep the price balanced. But BlackRock's going to have to balance the price of Bitcoin. The volatility needs to go. And, I think all of these moves will eventually balance out Bitcoin. So this is a big stabilization strategy, I think. And these pension funds coming on board is going to help a lot. Sovereign countries, pension funds, long-term holders like Mandeville, very different holder. They're not just selling out of fear. They're holding. They have the Michael Saylor long-term strategy. And those are the buyers and holders we want of Bitcoin. Let's be serious. And it's happening. So I think it's good for Bitcoin. Did you guys read the Loomis bill? This new bill she's proposing? I mean, can I read you some of the stuff?
Sure.
Specific, the legislation would establish a decentralized network of secure Bitcoin vaults operated by the U.S. Department of Treasury, with statutory requirements ensuring the highest level of physical and cybersecurity for the nation's Bitcoin holdings. Implement a 1 million unit Bitcoin purchase program over a set period of time. I mean, this is extremely bullish stuff. Be paid for by diversifying existing funds within the Federal Reserve System and Treasury. Affirm self-custody rights of private Bitcoin holders and emphasize that the strategic Bitcoin reserve shall not infringe upon individual financial freedoms. The bill is expected to be introduced in the coming days. I mean, this is happening, guys.
Yeah.
When these pension funds and people read this stuff, this Loomis bill, this Trump speech, they're coming in and they don't sell. They're here for the long haul. They're here for 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 years. So we've got a new buyer in town. It's finally happening.
Yeah. RFK laid out a very concrete plan as well. I think it was buying 550 Bitcoin a day up until 4 million Bitcoin or something. I think he doesn't realize that it's impossible to buy 4 million Bitcoin even if you tried, because there's only 14 available because so many have been lost. And then some other cool stuff as well, like 1031 exchange, tax-free Bitcoin transactions, but you could swap your Bitcoin for real estate. I thought that was quite profound. It was a very well thought out, structured plan with very specific numbers and elements, which I thought was fantastic. So we don't know where this is going to go. If you were to guess the odds of a Treasury Reserve status happening in the US, would it be 10%? Would it be 80%, 50%? Even if these politicians, after all they say, how much will actually come true and how much power do they have to push these things through? Mando, any thoughts on that?
I don't think the Democrats will go to this extent. I think it would be too much of a 180, but I do think Trump probably would. Now, I think you're really resting on the idea that he would follow through with some of these promises, but at the same time, he's made this one of his key policy issues, right? Crypto is definitely one of the things that he talks about.
Yeah.
So I would say you're really looking at the probability of Trump getting in and then the probability of him being able to get it through Congress. It's, I would say, probably in kind of a 50-50 sort of rate right now. Like if it's 60% probability that he gets in, you'd like to think 70 to 80% that he'd be able to push it through.
Wow. Well, that changes the calculus for everything. So let's check in on where we are. I put together this very crude matrix. You know, the 90-day post-halving, it's always choppy. We just left that 90-day post-halving. The first red vertical line is the halving date. The all-time high is across the top. The floor is at the bottom. And here we are breaking out, you know, tapping on the 70K. And from 70 to 73 isn't a big stretch. When all-time high? Or do we have to get through the summer doldrums first? Wait for people to come back from vacation? Like literally with this game theory, there's individuals, high net worth individuals. I haven't checked on Mr. 100 in a while. I need to do that. But it won't take a lot to move. And also what we didn't touch on is everybody was fearful of the Mt. Gox dumping. They didn't. And that was proven by CryptoQuant on Kraken. They are not selling. They're holding as we thought they would. So sellers of miners have capitulated and the pensions are coming. There's more tailwinds than headwinds. Thoughts?
It's difficult with short-term price prediction, I think. It's really difficult. I think volatility will increase as we've seen as we approach 70K. We just went down 3K and we wiped out Bitcoin open interest was at the highest level ever today. The highest level ever. So there's a lot of people to be wiped out. And that's what you'll continue to see. You know, as we get towards all-time highs, the volatility of the price will increase. I do think there's a shot that we go through it in the next 2 weeks. But all I would say is, you know, just have maybe a bit more of a long-term view. I think you could not think of a more bullish setup here. Even going into the headline, right? So into the headlines on the weekend that around Trump's speech, Bitcoin actually dumped during the speech, which tells you that people have been positioning into it. A lot of this, as with any market, is about who your buyers and who your sellers and who's been like pre-positioned into this sort of stuff. So I think increasingly as we get towards all-time high, you're going to see more wipeouts here of open interest. Even if we go above 70K and hit like 72, 73K, I think we're going to hit 70K probably a few times. Volatility will increase as we go higher. And I think it's the same for Solana too. Like as it goes higher and they become more and more consensus trades, it's not that they're wrong trades, but just expect volatility to go up.
Yeah, I agree.
Marty, I had just 1 second. I had Raoul Powell on Friday on my show, and he said that just going back to the treasury reserves, he said that the US is least likely to fill up their reserves with Bitcoin, but it's more global sovereign nations that probably will go into Bitcoin reserves because the US can just print dollars. They don't have the same problem. But I think the first country to print money to buy Bitcoin is going to be the winner. That's going to be the next thing, is outside the US, countries are going to print money to buy Bitcoin and put it in their reserves. That's going to be interesting. The other thing is that, go ahead.
Do you follow Samson Mao, Marty?
Yes, I love Samson Mao.
He has extreme conviction that Bitcoin will hit $1 million in 12 months. And I know he works with nation states to adopt Bitcoin, like El Salvador and others. Do you think he has a card up his sleeve he's not mentioning to have that type of conviction about Bitcoin going to $1 million in a year? Because the way he says it, he's dead certain. And it's just stunning to me.
Well, I know he's been going on a roadshow, right? He's been going around the world, Argentina, Paraguay, Venezuela. He's been in Europe. He's been in the UAE. He's on a roadshow. He has a whole lot of clients, sovereign nations, that he's been pitching to. And he might have a strategy. He did it in El Salvador. He pulled it off. He has a success story. So I think if other nation states start to build Bitcoin reserves, I think that's quite a big thing. And 1 million is not off the cards. But once again, guys, remember the price doesn't go down when people are selling necessarily. The price goes down when people want to buy a lot at a lower price. Remember, buying and selling is not a good way of looking at price. For every buy, there's a sell, and for every sell, there's a buy. It's all about what price do they settle at. So, and the other thing is flushing. Binance is going to flush the longs. So I think Bitcoin, the way it works right now is we're being suppressed at the 70 range, using the carry trades on the ETS to accumulate. And when it does go, it's going to go extremely fast. I'm looking for 21-hour green candles, taking us up to the 100,000 range and price out everybody else. And then the game theory kicks in on the way up there. So I think towards the election, they'll continue the suppression. Every time it approaches 70, 72, they'll bring it back down. But then when they pull their shorts, the carry trades, Jane Street pulls their shorts, Binance pulls their shorts, we shoot up unbelievably fast. I think these are the last weeks or months of this Bitcoin discount under 70,000.
That answers Charles's question. Is this the last Bitcoin dump before banana? So super interesting. All right, let's pull this out. Let's talk very quickly, and then you guys have some things to wrap. Hold on a second. Let me get this clear. I'm juggling here. This one from Raoul Paul again. Speaking of the devil, 2-year target 2.5% on the 2-year. Too many twos in that one, but he sees a complete breakdown in this 2-year rate, which is key to look at, especially for things like inverted yield curves. Any macro thoughts on this one and how bullish this could be?
We got a really big week in macro. So we have the Fed, we have the BOJ, and we have the Bank of England all doing policy. The BOJ might raise rates for the first time in decades this week, but everywhere else, it's how fast they cut. I don't think anyone's expecting a Fed cut this week, but they are expecting it for September and potentially even multiple cuts by the end of the year. Look, inflation's come down a lot, and in fact, if you read between the lines, there's been a lot of talk about the consumer demand softening in the US. It's showing up in earnings, but also in actually macro data. I think you're going to see a pretty fast rate cut here from what's going on in the US.
And then there's another reason for this type of sentiment. This is Dr. Copper. Over the last 10 weeks, copper price have dropped by 21% to the lowest level since April 1st, entering a bear market. When copper tanks, that means the global industrial machine is dying. It's not a good thing. Do you guys watch Dr. Copper at all? And do you give credence to this? Because when the global market slows down, industrial production, etc., it shows there's a recession coming, which means central banks have to cut to try stimulate the economy. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is it. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, basically it's a key economic indicator, but I think this goes back to what I just said. There's just these are the sort of things that people are getting more worried about consumer demand. There aren't that many prices. You look at oil, you look at copper now, they're all starting to come down. The only thing that got people scared about was freight rates, but I don't think that's going to be that aggressive or persistent, I think.
Exactly. I think somebody had a joke here. Copper is the only commodity with a PhD. Well, that's kind of like the top topics from me. I know, Mando, you got a couple of things you wanted to circle back on, and Marty, as we wrap here.
Yeah, I'd like to go, if people aren't aware of this week, Mando mentioned it, but this is an incredible macro week, guys. We've got Spain, Germany, France, Italy, and the Eurozone Q2 GDP. That's on the 30th, right? Tomorrow. That's huge. We've got the US Fed all week with an interest rate decision on the 31st. And did you guys see the CME Fed Watch? It's dropped to 80% for a rate cut in September. It's come down from 96 to 89. So actually, they've reversed probability on that. We could possibly not see a rate cut in September.
And one good thing,
Bank of Japan. Yeah, we've got Bank of Japan interest rate decision on the 31st. Bank of England interest rate decision on the 1st. US non-farm payroll on the 2nd. US employment rate on the 2nd. We've got AMD, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, Apple, MicroStrategy, and Coinbase earnings this week, guys. This is a huge week. So what do I expect? I expect firstly a big flush. And we start seeing it today already. The market makers are going to try and get rid of as many longs. And that's happening. But I think that the probability of a rate cut has gone down if you look at Fed Watch. And we may see less of a chance of a Fed rate going even into tomorrow until he talks. But that's the highlight of the week is Jerome Powell's speech. I think hawkish, dovish, the tone, all eyes will be on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up September, checking on that. It is 89.6% chance of a cut, and a double cut 10%. It's still 99.6% for September. I don't know what you're seeing.
Yeah, it's come down from the 90s though.
No. It's come down from. It's 89.6 for a single 25 basis point cut, but now the double cut, the 50 basis point has gone up from 3% to 10%. So when you add them together, it's a sure thing. It's a definite rate cut happening in September. And the other good thing about Jerome Powell, and you'll see in his comments, he telegraphs exactly what he's going to do. That's one thing you can rely on him for. He'll tell you what's going to happen next meeting based on his comments. And they know it's a house of cards. They know the employment numbers are fake. They know the GDP numbers are all fake. And if there is any GDP growth, it's spawned by government spending. And they're all of their debt's hitting 35 trillion.
James, I wanted to ask you,
yeah.
of all companies on the stock market that benefit from a rate cut, what's number one?
Tesla. Well, cars.
Yeah,
any car company.
this is Tesla's week. If
also,
they cut rates,
and Phase as well. No, there will be no rate cut this week. I want that to be clear to everybody.
I mean, if there's a dovish tone and he supports the 18th of September rate cut, like the 90% we've got, I think Tesla's going to rally. I think we're going to see an incredible Tesla rally.
And just to prove the impact, when Tesla support low interest rates on loans for their cars sell out like that. Like they had an offer, they had to cancel it after 5 days because they sold all their inventory. And that's the importance of kind of lower rates, because most people finance their cars, which is expensive. Mando, over to you. Final thoughts, the big things you're looking at.
Yeah, I actually looking at it slightly different. I thought last week was an interesting point in stocks, in that you saw the majority of the Magnificent Seven do pretty badly, and you saw the Russell do all right. You saw this rotation away from the Magnificent Seven into small caps, which I just thought was very interesting. That could just be 1 week, or it could be a little bit of a trend. We have a huge amount of tech earnings this week, so I think let's see what happens. There's starting to be a bit of fear creep in, like I said, about this consumer demand across the US right now. I'm definitely looking to see how the market reacts on these Magnificent Seven this week. I'm not bearish on them, but if that becomes 2 or 3 weeks worth, you could see, which has been a multi-month trade, that you should own nothing but the Magnificent Seven. This last week was the first week, but that's slightly reversed. I think I'm interested to see how that goes this week.
Yeah, good stuff. Marty, thoughts from you? You said a minute ago there'd be a flush. So
what's that? Go ahead.
You said a minute ago there would be a flush.
Yes.
So
a flush is basically when the perpetual exchanges need to remove as many longs as they can, get rid of the leverage. And typically in previous cycles they've done quite a heavy flush. The giant V-shaped recovery, just to clear as many longs as they can. We haven't really had that this cycle. We've had a couple of teasers. So in the back of my mind, I'm always a little aware of that. Maybe a 65, a 62, somewhere around there. We should be aware of that. If you can get that on the bottom and long it, that is a dream long. If you can buy more Bitcoin down there, that's a dream entry. But we might not get it just because you've got a new owner in Bitcoin. And I believe that between Jane Street and Binance in the market maker world, as well as GSR and Wintermute, they no longer have the firepower they used to. These flushes are not as deep. It's a new cycle. I feel like we have a new cycle. I think this week will be FOMC. We'll see the interest rate feeling, Jerome Powell, which will influence the stock market. My big theory is we're going to roll over the Magnificent Seven, and a lot more of that is going to go into crypto than before. I think that's going to happen. But we're going up, guys. It's just a matter of time. And when we do go up, I think, mark my words, we'll see 21-hour green candles, which will take us to around 96, test 100, go up to maybe, I would say, 112 to 128. That's the cup and handles projection. I'm sticking with it.
And back to your flush theory, there's not a lot to the left, which means there's not a lot of leverage longs to wipe out.
No,
there's much more the short side. So
absolutely. I think we're looking to take out those shorts next, which will entice a short squeeze. And we know what happens when Bitcoin short squeezes. Yeah. Right? We get FOMO. We get the retail FOMO comes back when they see the hourly candles going green for hours and hours on end. And that can cause just an astronomical push up. And that's what I see coming. It's just a matter of time. I thought it would be around the election, but I think this cycle, everything is sort of accelerating. Regulatory, stablecoin adoption, politics. It feels like there's a momentum building in crypto, and we shouldn't underestimate what can happen. I think we just got to be ready as traders. Be prepared. Have dry powder ready to long. Be aware of that final flush. Have something ready just on the side, on an exchange, just to grab that long. And if you haven't packed your bags, you better pack them soon, guys. The discount is going to end. There's no way around it. This is the most bullish weekend in the history of crypto. and I've been around since 2014. We've been asking for all these events in crypto forever, and they finally happened. We've got presidential candidates talking about Bitcoin. We've got Loomis pushing a bill that literally change crypto forever. If that happens, it'll become part of U.S. law. All these words. Crypto is in U.S. law if this goes through. And so I'll be watching out for that. But guys, we're going up. Bullish as hell.
Bullish. I love that. And this time is different. As from HS1 here, we are seeing, again, from looking at this, we were talking about, say, game theory and nation state adoption and pensions stacking for 7 years. Now
well, the question to you, James and Mando, what black swans are left? What probable black swans are left from our list of black swans we had?
Gox is gone. Gensler's on the way out. All the G's are going.
Maybe the Tether FUD will come back, but I don't know. No, I think I'll just doing a great job.
Okay, the chairman of Cantor was up at the Bitcoin conference, and they managed the bags for Tether. And they said they've got more than a 5 or 15% surplus right now because all the money they've made from stacking gold and Bitcoin and everything else. Remember, they have a huge bag of Bitcoin. I think it's like 50,000 Bitcoin or 80,000 Bitcoin tethered already. Big position. So they take their treasury interest profits and they buy Bitcoin with it. It's a perfect DCA strategy. Mando.
Yeah, I like that about the known knowns. They're all. In fact, I think the known knowns are kind of bullish. Like I said before, that FTX giving back 15 to 20 billion is going to be a wild amount of cash that people are going to have in crypto to kind of gamble with. That being said, last week we were talking about, one candidate in the US election dropping out and the other one nearly getting assassinated. You never know. You never know with crypto. I do think it's insanely volatile, but I do think it's tough not to be unbelievably bullish.
Yeah, and then you got.
The only black swan to me is Kamala winning and her turning out to be anti-crypto. But we don't know. She hasn't made any statements yet.
Or they're trying to get in because they know it's a loser for some of the voting populace. The Dems are trying to get in, and there was a whole committee of 18 people that signed a letter to Kamala saying, embrace crypto now or we could lose our seats. And that's all these politicians care about, is keeping their seats. Tony had a good point. Black Swan here, the Dems sell 200,000 Bitcoin. And of course, my wag the dog theory from Three White Show Soldiers, a war could pop up. And if anybody's familiar with wag the dog, it's when you distract the populace right before an election with something like war. So that's a wrap right now, everybody. We'll try to keep this to an hour. So everybody's time is very precious. Final thoughts?
Well, let's do this, guys. Next week, let's predict what's the price of Bitcoin, Mando. Next week, our next show.
I will say that we will have another run at 71K by this time next week. That's what I'll say.
There we go. James?
We'll be above 70,000, and I think Solana could be above 200. Double prediction.
I'm going to say we're at 78 to 80,000.
Wow, Super Bowl. Thank you, gents. I really appreciate everybody, and thank you everybody in the audience too. Great show as always, and we'll be back next Monday, same time, same place. Follow everybody on their channels. Mando streaming on X, Marty's streaming. I don't know where Marty's streaming right now, on X too, or YouTube.
Yeah, I stream every day. I have a space every day from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. Traders Club. We're just trading all the way. Or tomorrow we've got the launch of the first ever meme coin shorting platform on Solana, which is really cool. You should check in on that so you can short your favorite memes. I think it's a cool idea.
I saw that. I saw that in Mando Minutes. And by the way, Mando Minutes are awesome. If you want to know what's going on in markets and crypto, check out Mando Minutes as well. Freaking awesome stuff.
I love guys. Mando Minutes is spectacular. I don't know how he does it. It's a brilliant thing. Mando Minutes.
And Marty, I love your. I love you. And Marty, I love your on-chain research too. So just follow these guys if you want to know exactly what's going on. And we're impartial. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Have a great week.
Let's go.
See you next week.
See ya.
We're going up.